All right, I wanted to welcome everyone to the Tuesday, January 23rd Select Board meeting. Calling the meeting to order. First up is approval of the agenda, and I think we have two items that I'd like to add this evening.
And one to take away.
And one to take away, sweet. Okay, which one are we remain?
Number 13.
Okay, so the inline flow meters.
That is number 13, asking to take away the finance and maintenance agreement.
Oh, okay. All right, at Morse Road, that's the takeaway? Okay. And so we do have an item for the flow meters out at the wastewater treatment plant, and I'd like to put that in after all the other infrastructure, maybe call that 12E. Can you hear me, Victor? Let me get that closer. And then the other one is potentially Turning Point coming to ask us about adding to the town meeting Health and Human Services. So I'd like to take that right before number 7. So after number 6, but before number 7. Okay? So
call it 6A?
We'll call it 6A. So if that's okay with the board, I'm looking for a motion to.
We accept the agenda with changes.
Thank you, Laura. And you'll second. Thank you, Farhad. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so let's take a look. We've got 2 meeting minutes. Oh, wait, yes. For the January 9th regular Select Board meeting. Is there a motion to approve the meeting minutes? I'll take Victor, and maybe you can second. All right. Are there any changes or suggestions or additions?
No.
Those were really good meeting minutes. Okay. So all in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed?
Aye.
Thank you, Brian. Okay, so let's take a look at January 17th, our special meeting minutes. I'm looking for a motion to approve.
I'll move.
Thank you, Farhad.
I'll second.
Thank you, Laura. Any suggested changes, additions?
They were good.
Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks, Brian. Any opposed? Okay, thank you. So then we have the citizens' comments, and this is the opportunity for anyone in the public to raise or address issues that are not otherwise included on our agenda. So would you like to come up to the microphone, please, and please state your name for the record?
Yeah, my name is Michael Buska, and I'd like to make a comment. The town green up here, where they found that deceased man, well, I know up in Bristol, they take patrol the park, the police do, and they have everybody off by certain hours. And I think the police here, police force should have the same thing here in Middlebury, have everybody off at certain hours. So I was proposing maybe they should do that here in Middlebury.
Okay. So just clarify, to have everyone out of the park at a certain time period?
Certain time, like
Okay.
at 10, so that way nobody's left behind,
Okay.
okay?
Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
suggestion. Is there anyone else? Oh, right here, and then we'll get to you next.
Good evening, Mark Mooney here. My comments really are related to a question I need to ask first.
Okay.
I would like to know what progress has been made in negotiations with the college regarding the contribution to the cost of the new ladder truck for the fire department.
Okay.
Is there any, I haven't heard anything at any of the meetings recently.
Is there any sort of update on that one, Kathleen, that you know of? Otherwise, we'll probably have to find out.
There's no update.
Okay, so we could,
Well,
did you want to say something, Laura?
I thought that we understood that they're not intending to make a contribution for that because of their feelings about how we should be.
Sorry, I didn't.
I think, Brian, don't you remember this too, that they're not intending to make a contribution to the ladder truck. That doesn't mean that they won't make a contribution to us for some other needs, but not that one.
It seems to me that is a significant piece of equipment that is being purchased by the town, and I'm very confident that the specifications for that ladder truck were geared to address needs that the college would have in using that in the event of an emergency or fire. So, and then I also understand that on the first ladder truck, they paid for nearly all of that cost.
Well, I'm going to say a few things and then see if Brian wants to weigh in. But I remember the discussion, and I remember we brought it up with them. But I think back when they did pay for the ladder truck, they weren't paying for a lot of other items going on at the same time, whereas they do now. And there's significant money that they pay for now versus then. And I think the intention was to put together a comprehensive list of all the different monies that they contribute where and when. They were going to do that in-house and sort of share that with us later. And do you recall anything more than that, Brian?
No, good memory, Susan. That was our discussion when we brought it up last time we talked about it. The college has given a lot to the town in recent years, and the other thing was the ladder truck. The need for it is not just the college, and so as a result, the town has changed a lot, and so there's a lot of the businesses that also have need for a ladder truck to be efficient and combatant fires, and so they felt that it was maybe a mischaracterization to say the ladder truck was purchased for their facilities, and actually their facilities have invested heavily in fire suppressants with sprinklers and everything as a result of the amount of students that are in there, whereas a lot of our other buildings do not have that same level of investment. And so I think that they felt that they do a lot for the town, and that that was a town need regardless.
So I think we see your point, but we look at it on a larger scale of their contributions than just that.
And I understand Brian's point about what the town has done recently in contributing to this building and others and so forth. And for a change, I thought that the college now becoming a proactive player in the town's infrastructure and needs, because it certainly benefits them to have a town that's in good repair when their parents and students come here, so that this is a special piece of equipment. It's not unlike the bridge, in my opinion. It's nearly $1 million, and the college has 2,500 residents, and most towns in Vermont have their own fire departments of that size, volunteer as they may be, and equipment to take care of their town's needs in the event of fire emergencies or other kinds. And it just seems to me that we should be a little more assertive in requesting contribution that is fair for almost $1 million piece of equipment that, again, I say, I'm sure that the specs, when they were looked at for that piece of equipment, clearly considered the needs of the college, because in the event of a fire, I'm sure that they'd want the ladder truck there, and I know we would do that. But I just don't understand with recent an attitude about helping the town, why they wouldn't see this as a very significant piece of equipment that is truly a benefit to their protection, where they wouldn't contribute a fair share. So I would hope that our board members, when they meet with them again, would not let this go by, no matter how we might feel about how generous they've been in the past, because this is a special need, and special needs come up, you can't predict those. So it's a time, I understand they've made contributions recently, but we only buy a ladder truck about every, 25 or 30 years. So it isn't like we're asking for something that is less than needy for both they and us as a town. So I would support not accepting that as a reasonable answer, and asking if they would reconsider their decision not to contribute.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Okay, second comment. I'm very encouraged by the board's recent effort to repurpose the monies for what was set aside to keep the bridge maintenance with the 1%. I think that's a very good move, and I think it should become something that the board now makes as almost a policy. I know you're doing, a survey at the
We're doing more than, we're going to be asking voters to vote on approximately $57,000 towards the capital improvements budget. And so it's not a survey, it's an actual warning at town meeting.
Do we think we'll have to do this each year if we use those monies?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes. When the select board originally requested the local option tax, it was dedicated to the bridge, and promises made that any other use than that would have to be a town decision. In other words, the select board by itself can't change the policy. It would have to be at a town meeting.
And I understand that. So my suggestion is that this money has become a regular source of income now, and is a broad-based tax, frankly. And I think it should become a part of what we look at when we're considering infrastructure improvements in the future. And that this fund, without depleting it to a point that it wouldn't address the original purpose, that it has become a significant revenue source, and it's broad-based, and that we should now look at that in that way.
Well, this one, I'm happy to say the board agrees with you, and if the warning is successful at town meeting in future, the infrastructure committee will be looking at other projects that they can bring forward next year to do the same thing.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Thank you. I saw one more hand up. Come on up.
Sorry to keep everybody longer. My name is David Pistilli, and I have a comment and a suggestion, I hope, about snow removal from our town sidewalks. And I'd like to preface my statement by saying this is not a critique of the Department of Public Works' effort to do so. I'm grateful for what they do and for what the town has afforded us in that capacity. I've had occasion for the last 3 weeks to walk from my home on South Street to the hospital campus every day, nearly every day, often twice a day, once 3 times in one day and at night. And I've walked on every condition of snow imaginable in those 3 weeks. Sometimes it was deep snow, sometimes it was very low but icy, sometimes it was slushy, sometimes it was all chewed up by foot traffic and had iced over. In no time during those 3 weeks was it actually pleasurable to walk on it. And I dare say it was a choice that I was making. I wanted to walk rather than drive. And I'm lucky, I feel fortunate that I'm able-bodied enough to do so. But it was much more difficult for people whom I have observed who were less able-bodied or who might not have had the choice and were perhaps pushing an umbrella stroller in front of them on this very walk that goes from the center of town to the hospital. And I saw similar conditions on South Main Street when I walked on that. Like I said at the beginning, I am grateful for what the town does and what the Department of Public Works does to clear our sidewalks to a certain level, and notwithstanding the fact that there might be an improved tactic, technique, or procedure that might be employed to try to get to that last 1 or 2 inches. But notwithstanding that, I feel like we as townspeople can meet them halfway or more than halfway and get that final inch or 2 off by ourselves if we can motivate the residents of all of the properties along these paths that the town plows to clear that last inch or 2 by themselves. I was raised with that ethos in a different part of the United States. It was probably compelled by ordinance, which I would frankly not like to see us adopt. I feel like an ordinance would seem punitive and would be a nightmare to enforce. I would not want to be Chief Hanley or whomever would be out there trying to enforce such an ordinance. But I feel like we can do better as a town and that we can motivate our citizens to do so. I've floated this idea with several of my old-time townmates. I've not lived in this town for a long time. There's been what I would describe as fierce resistance to it. But everything, all of the reasons that are offered to me sound almost like excuses rather than good reasons. So I don't know what we as a town can do to motivate our citizens to do that, short of compelling them to do so by ordinance and having to enforce that. I know that we talk about making the town accessible to pedestrians, walkable, bikeable, enjoyable, and I think that includes the winter as well as the summer. And I especially think it includes, or should include, the path to the hospital from the central part of town, which today I can tell you, after my experience, it's very difficult to make that walk. So I don't know how to implement the suggestion. It may not be implementable. But if it's even something that can be considered as the committees that do think about how we can make our town a better place to live and to work and to play, I would be grateful.
I think we have sort of addressed that one before and found it equally
Demanding too.
demanding. Yeah, I know, looks like Laura might have a few things to say, but I don't know if you were sort of leaning towards the microphone and then just changed your mind. We can pass along the information to the Public Works Department, but it is a challenge, and
Yeah, no, again, to me, it's not about Public Works, it's about
right. Well, we did do a
8,000
survey,
the rest
didn't
of
we,
us,
at town meeting one year? Didn't we do a survey about having clear your own sidewalks, and it did not go over
yeah.
well?
My fellow citizens don't evidently
Yeah.
take, and I mean, it's disappointing to me. I know there are elderly citizens, I know there are infirmed citizens, but there are many able-bodied citizens like myself, and I passed many a house, and this is not to discredit the college, but all of those college, or most of those college properties are inhabited by middle-aged, able-bodied people who could go out and shovel their walk, and it's maybe 50 or 100 feet, and I know where there are institutions that front the walk. The institutions could be relied upon to do so. I know our downtown businesses do that because their business relies on it. I feel like we could do this if it matters, and if it doesn't matter, that's okay. Tell me to shut up.
Well, I think if we got to the point where we wanted to spearhead something, we would call you first and have you lead us
Be your
into
cheerleader.
we know where our cheerleader is.
Join Laura's committee to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I think you can use social media and stuff to spread the word like
Yeah,
this.
not me, social media, sorry.
The Front Porch Forum.
But I can wield a shovel.
I do know that the town has 18 miles of sidewalk that it clears, right? And when there's constantly falling snow, as we had recently, it was challenging for them to keep up with it, and they do try to rest the crews a little bit over the weekend if they can. But still, we know that we have to keep up with the sidewalks as best we can. Sometimes the equipment has an issue, or sometimes the staff may be sick. There could be a lot of reasons that we don't get out as repetitively as we might have with a previous storm that people can ask about. That's why it is good to direct questions to us and Kathleen so that we can.
Yeah, and I can say
respond
that
to that.
in this case, it is decidedly not the equipment that
What you're
plow
talking about is
passed-
something different,
Yeah,
yeah.
it passed so many times, and I felt badly actually for the operator, because it was not removing any, it was leaving the last 2 inches, and if only, again, if a citizen had gone out after it passed, as I pay somebody, I hire someone to plow my drive, and when he is done plowing my drive, which that plow is a blunt instrument, I go out and I get the last couple of inches and feet and yards myself. So I understand that that's
Yeah.
just going to happen. So to me, it's really not about the equipment. It's not about the operator.
Well, for those that are watching that are willing, you can definitely do that, and I did do that with my own sidewalk, and there
Yeah.
are sand buckets in different spots, so if you do happen to notice an icy area, you can sprinkle some sand down there, yourselves. You have permission to do that, even though, the town will be looking at doing that also.
Right. To me, it's how do you stimulate our citizens to have that sense, that ethic of wanting to care for their property in front of their house, both in winter as well as in summer. If they were to place an obstruction on the sidewalk, or not in some way, shape, or form care for the good order and discipline of their sidewalk, there's probably an ordinance that is enforceable. But in winter, it seems like all bets are off. And if it snows, and if you're walking, it sucks to be you. And then and on we go. So it just does not seem to be part of the makeup here, whereas we do so many things well, and if we just did that for those other 4 months of the year, we'd
And there's
be
sometimes
year-round.
the conditions are ideal and it doesn't wind up being like that, and other times this year, the conditions have not been ideal,
it's
so.
at least once a year that something
Yeah.
goes wrong.
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, we probably can't do much more than that, but if we get to that
Yeah.
point, we will call you and say, let's go.
All right, I'll let Laura, enlist me in her committee to make the town walkable. Very well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Everyone else here for an agenda item? Okay, let's dive right in. Tree Warden Chris Cioli is here to update us on his report and findings from the apple tree that is in the public right-of-way in front of 33 South Street.
And I'm afraid to say it's part of the issue of clearing the
Sidewalk
sidewalk. Yes. So I hope you have a copy of this, but I can summarize it for you. We had a hearing for the tree in front of 33 South Street. It's an apple tree that leans over the sidewalk and is an impediment to the sidewalk plow. The trunk of the tree, there's no pruning it, there's no way to make it possible for that plow to work past it without taking the tree down. And that was the DPW's choice of last resort. And they wanted to do that, so we had a hearing for that. The homeowner came to the second hearing that we had on that issue and brought enough information and letters and previous owners that made it quite clear that the tree was an important part of the neighborhood. And it was, since we all work for the taxpayers, the decision was to try and keep it. And working with the town attorney and Matt Cram and Bill Kernan from the DPW. We came up with a letter of commitment for the homeowner to sign and return to the town. And unfortunately, I fumbled the ball on that and didn't get that to him until Kathleen reminded me to do so, which was just on Monday. And so we haven't heard back from him or her yet on that. But basically, it states that they are responsible. They will accept the responsibility physically and financially of taking care of the lawn that gets damaged from the plow going around the trunk of the tree. And but the town will, hopefully this spring, plant replacement trees on either side of the apple tree, and in less than 2 years' time after their planting, be able to take down the apple tree. And hopefully that will satisfy everybody.
Okay. So we
That's
could.
a brief, very brief.
That's very good. No, I like the agreement that you came up with. So we could consider it this evening pending the signature of the homeowners?
Right.
Okay. So are there any questions from the board?
So would the replacement trees also be fruit trees to be consistent, because that seemed to matter, or?
Preferably not. That did seem to be important to the neighborhood, but if you go by there in the fall, the fruit dropping is a mess.
So
And
I know that people
do appreciate
appreciate free food, and
it's a hard one to not want to replace it with, but and apple trees are not known for their salt tolerance, so
that's another consideration.
Yeah.
Okay. What about a nut-bearing one? Would you have?
I would hesitate to do that
Okay.
because of the sidewalk issues and
Yeah.
the possibility of someone just rolling on a nut. Yes, I would love to plant fruit trees for birds and habitat, but I don't think that that's a practical replacement.
I believe there was another tree on South Street that was maybe a crabapple or fruit tree that also was dropping a lot, and the homeowner or the property owner wasn't there in the fall, so nobody was cleaning up the sidewalk. So I understand your point about that.
There are quite a few crabapples on South Street, the more northern end of it. There's quite a few. So haven't come up with the perfect solution yet, but I'll work on it.
Okay, thank you.
Brian, is there anything that you wanted to add?
No, I'm good with supporting this.
Okay. So I'm looking for a motion.
I'll move that we sign the agreement between the town and William Nash and Deborah Evans regarding the status and maintenance of regarding the apple tree, pending
Pending their signature.
their signature.
Okay.
1 second.
Thank you, Farhad. Any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much, Chris.
Thank you.
Chief, you're up. Welcome to the hot seat.
Been here before.
So you wrote a very nice summary for us on your recommendations for the award and bid of 2 cruisers.
Yes.
Okay.
We found some great utility in using an SUV, or at least having 1 or 2 of them in the fleet. I wouldn't want to have the whole fleet with SUVs, but they're nice to have. A year and a half ago, when we had an event on the trail around Middlebury, we couldn't get the sedans in there, and we had the 1 SUV, which got us and equipment up in there. So that came in handy. With the other car, it's an unmarked car that I use. It's used by sergeants. It's used for special details. So that came in at a slightly lower bid than a regular cruiser did. So what I did was look at, this might be the year that the SUV comes in a higher bid, significantly higher than a sedan does. But the one we have now is getting into its last year, so I just wanted to make sure we have at least one there in the fleet, and that's why the recommendation is as it is. It just gives us a lot more utility. Doesn't replace a sedan primarily for most day-to-day uses. So the recommendation was for the one car, the admin car, to go with Foster Motors, the low bid. There's no reason to waive the low bid in any case, simply because all the bids met the specifications. We did put in the bid specifications for this year a preference for an SUV, and G-Stones was the only one that bid for an SUV.
Okay.
Do you use it just as is, or do you retrofit it for your use, reinforce and so?
Which car is that?
Either one.
Either one. Oh, yeah, they're all upfitted. Even the unmarked car that's upfitted as a cruiser. What happens is if we have two cars go down for maintenance or repair, or if one gets banged up, this car is just easily transferred as a replacement car. So that is our one backup. We use it for transportation when people are going to school. There's a lot of reasons different things, special enforcement details we use it for. So it's equipped just like a police car is, except it doesn't have the light bar and it doesn't have the fancy stuff in the back seat. The SUV is outfitted just like the one we have now with all the inserts and equipment. The other thing is the overall cost, the upfit cost for the admin car is significantly less than it is for a marked cruiser. So there's a reduction in the cost there and a little higher cost, so we figured this would be a good year to balance it out without having extraordinary expenses and trying to keep the fleet to where we need it.
So, and I know that the other benefit with newer vehicles is improved fuel efficiency, correct?
Improve fuel efficiency, but the practice we've done now for a few years, when we trade them in instead of waiting for them to fall apart, Foster's gave us $3,500 for a 10-year-old car. That's significant. We used to bid these things out, and I think, what did we get, Kathleen, $400, $200? We had to pay somebody to take them away. So we found that saves us a lot of money on keeping the fleet going as well.
Well, I certainly appreciate saving the money that way, but I also appreciate reduced carbon footprint related to transportation. And so that's really the purpose of my question also.
Yeah, they are more efficient. The fuel systems in the car and the engines are much more efficient than they used to be with those 10-mile per gallon things we used to drive. Ford is coming out with, or they came out this year with some kind of a hybrid police car, but it's new, and I'm not ready to go on the bleeding edge of something yet.
We talked about that in public health and safety a bit, as well as no idling devices, which the chief also explained made more sense in a larger fleet than in a smaller fleet. But as that technology comes along, and if it's worth it, it's something for us to explore.
Yeah, Scott Foster did some research on one of the things. We actually put it in our bid some years ago, and these things were not really recommended to be put in these cars as aftermarket devices. A lot of cars had fire problems and some other issues with them, so I think most of them have been removed from the market.
Well, I appreciate the fact most all that we have reliable vehicles for the officers and the service you provide. That's first and foremost. Appreciate the fact you're going with the all-wheel drive sedans. This is what the second one have of them?
Yeah, they're all all-wheel drive. That's
Yeah,
what
so,
we
I mean,
bid
that's-
now.
That's tremendous.
They're excellent cars.
The product is offered, so that's excellent. So I think you've done the right thing, and when the time comes, I'd be willing to make the motion.
Anything from you, Brian?
No, I read, this is becoming almost routine. It's nice that our local vendors are doing a nice job of supplying so that it's easy to get the service, and from the dealership who's providing who's doing the sale. So I think it's worked out very well recently.
Okay. Do you want to go ahead and do the
And
motion?
of course, they're both excellent products, top-notch brands. So, yes, I'd make a motion to award contracts for the purchase of a 2018 Ford Interceptor utility SUV to G-Stone Motors for a price of $31,834, and a 2018 Dodge Charger sedan to Foster Motors for a price of $23,510.
Second.
Thank you, Victor. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, this is where we added the turning point to our agenda. I'm not sure if anyone's here from the Turning Point to speak for them. Doesn't look like it. So, do we still need to make the decision, or if they're not gonna ask?
If they're not going to ask?
All right, so we don't have to, looks like no one from the Turning Point is here this evening, so we have no decision to make if they're not going to ask the question. They had missed the deadline for applying to get on the budget warnings, so, all right, so let's move on. So next up is, myself with an update on the work of the Broadband group. And I saw Brian, there he is, and Chris English. Are you both going to come up, or is Chris going to hide in the back?
I'll be in the back.
He's going to hide in the back. Okay, fine. So, background, we have put 2 updates in the board packets. Our latest meeting, this is a group, Chris English, Brian Alexander, and myself have been meeting with Dave Donahue at the college to discuss broadband and sort of the economic development for the town, but also just having access to everyone and sort of seeing what the college is willing to talk to us about. There was a report done several years ago that was called the Tilson Report that sort of had a build out for fiber to home. And that isn't sort of where we were looking to talk about. We were looking to talk more about how do we leverage the college's assets and interest into what we can do in a different way. And so the latest minutes that we have, or notes, I should say, Chris wouldn't be mad at me if I said they were minutes, talked about, went through, we had added Dave Donahue, but we also added David Provost, who's a VP of Finance.
Yes.
And Howie McCausland, who is one on their IT staff.
Yes.
And so did you want to talk a little bit more about what we were doing, or do you want me to do that? I'd be happy to.
Well, why don't you carry on a bit more and I can jump in?
Okay, that sounds great. So just to catch everybody up, what we found out, the takeaways from our last meeting were that the college is not interested in being an ISP provider. They have a lot of existing agreements for their for providing bandwidth. They are interested in acting as what they called a thought partner, which means that they were willing to talk to us in the future about what the town might need, but they also understand that they have a lot of potential with their purchasing, negotiating power in identifying, maybe attracting a different company to come here. They've got a lot of on-campus, what they provide on campus, but they also have a lot of other office buildings and homes around town that they are also providing and purchasing service for. So I think for us, Brian was really helpful in the different things that he brought. A lot of the statements that you see here from Howie and David and Dave are from the questions that Brian asked. And Brian comes from Ripton, and the Ripton Broadband Co-op was one of the region's first sort of dive into community broadband. And we were sort of trying to feel them out on how we might explore that as well. I think what they found is that they really want the town to decide for itself what it's looking for, and I think we do need to do that. Brian, Chris, and I put together a draft survey that we have waiting in the wings, but at this point, the college is saying the town should decide what it wants, and then once it has decided that, then it can come back and be a thought partner with the college. So I think what we're going to suggest this evening is to request that the Selectboard consider further exploration of broadband as a project at your retreat. You know, is it important? And if so, then what comes next, and assign it a level in the retreat? our suggestion for moving forward would be, if it is considered to be important, you will probably need to, the town will probably need to hire someone to help with that decision-making going forward, to look at the survey, to make sure that we're getting the correct information out of it, to be able to analyze that and work with what's going to go forward, so that the town, I don't think the staff, this is one of those things, I think Kathleen put it in our last board packet, that there are several different topics that are being discussed around, and if we add those in, we do need to have some extra oomph behind staff in order to accomplish that goal, that it's not going to be something we can do by ourselves. I think Brian is still a person that would be wonderful to have in that conversation. Trying to think, have I hit everything?
You've done a fantastic job. I would just, first of all, is Brian Carpenter, you can hear me all right on the phone? That's not a good
I
answer.
hear you fine.
There he is.
Okay, good. Well, it's not very often there are two Brians in the same spot. That's a really good summary. I would just add a couple of quick points. The survey that we want to do is asking people about their broadband experience, so what kind of speed they have, are they satisfied, where do they get it, that kind of thing. We also had a need to get some intelligence about broadband and internet deployment in Addison County in general, but in particular in Middlebury, to see just how far Fairpoint, Comcast, and Severa reach, that kind of thing. This is a deep and intractable problem. It's one that's faced by every state in the union. It's a major, major issue, and it's one that we're failing to solve. I think I've spoken before about the different benefits of having better broadband and connectivity. I think you know all of them, so I won't repeat them. But this is a problem statewide, and currently Montpelier isn't helping very much. The governor has reassured me several times that the solution is a market solution, and so far we're witnessing market failure. And the legislature does not seem interested in pursuing this without a great deal of pressure. I would strongly recommend addressing this in your retreat. I would strongly recommend reaching out to other organizations, including, if necessary, lobbying Montpelier to try to get some action and some support. Because in 2018, it's bonkers not to have universal access, not to have universal broadband, and it's going to keep cramping the town's ability to develop, grow, and be attractive. The only other thing I would add to Susan's excellent précis is that Middlebury College was very generous to us with their time. They shared a great deal about their history and practice of working with the community, and they're very, very reasonable, very forthcoming, very informative, and a pleasure to work with. I'm happy to answer other questions, or to just direct them completely to Susan instead.
Go ahead, Nick.
So, Brian, what is the reason for the failure? Is it the population density?
That's one part.
So it's similar to what the land-based phone carriers encountered.
Yes, yes.
So,
And you see that across the U.S.
Yeah.
Where it's a rural. I mean, the biggest predictor of broadband divides is geographical. It's rural versus urban. And the only state that actually managed to make progress in this is Utah, which just happened to buy a ton of fiber in the 1990s. And even then, they still have issues, especially when it comes to cell phone coverage.
so was it the state that actually acquired?
Yeah.
It was a public-private partnership.
No, it's mostly the state.
So they actually acquired that.
Yeah, they're pretty foresightful. The other thing, though, about Vermont is that we do have some unusual terrain challenges. That we don't have the Rocky Mountains, but our mountains are nevertheless contorted and divisive. A third problem is, I think, in some ways, it's become a kind of chicken and the egg demand cycle where people are used to having bad broadband or slow access or no cell phone coverage and stop demanding more of it. We're simply accustomed to it. I mean, every year, or every few years, for example, somebody dies in the Adirondacks because they can't get cell phone coverage to summon somebody, and that's now just part of life in the Adirondacks. I think when I talk to people in Vermont who have terrible broadband access, they're all completely resigned. They're not active. They're like, well, that's the price we pay. It's like saying, mud season, what's the price we pay?
Right.
We can change broadband. The other thing is, if I may, is that we in Vermont, we made a political decision to step back from it. We had two state administrations that pushed very hard for broadband. And in fact, I was part of a meeting where we met with Governor Shumlin at the end of his major phase of pushing that out to celebrate how far we'd come. And then in his last term, That's stalled out, and as I said before, the current administration isn't interested in pursuing that. So there's a political decision there as well.
That is, and in fact, I remember Jamie was still a member of the staff.
Mhm.
There was a lot of discussion around this, even to the point of having the Fairpoint now consolidated or whatever. There
Right.
are people in here, and they acknowledge the problem, but they never acknowledge a direction forward to solve it.
Right.
Exactly.
And if this, and it seems to me if this becomes, and the argument is good for it, as an economic development issue of, as a priority, obviously, this is not a town staff thing, this is expertise to get it right. So,
Expertise helps a great deal.
well, it helps, in my mind, a huge deal, because otherwise there's a large learning curve that we put a demand on. So,
Right.
is it fair to say you would have knowledge of some organizations, you know,
Yes, several.
could provide that guidance, if we will, even under a contract arrangement?
Yes, yes, and that's not difficult to reach it, to accomplish. Let me come back to what you said about Fairpoint, not to pick on them too greatly, but when I mentioned the necessity of getting intelligence about actual broadband deployment, if you ask Fairpoint for how many people have what broadband access, they state that they can't tell us
I remember that exact point, but what they could
on their
say
own
was-
network, which is kind of mind-boggling, but that's one provider.
Right. But what was interesting is they couldn't provide that, but they could say, and I think it was in upwards of 50% of the traffic they were receiving was Netflix.
Which makes more sense, because
So
they're
that was the one tangible number they gave. And I
because
remember-
they're focusing very clearly on protecting their network, and that kind of stat you have automatically to hand. Economic development is a key factor, as is education, as is tourism. I have good friends who run the Robert Frost cabins down at the end of East Middlebury, and they say that their draw all the time is people who go there from big cities to get away from it all, to be in the woods, and they always want cell phones, and they always want broadband. And we might see this as hypocritical or strange, but those are consumers, and that's the 21st century. That's a good question. I have one question for you, which is, Farhad, how do you like your Chromebook?
Oh, the Chromebook?
Yes.
I like it here, I don't like it at home,
Because?
no broadband.
Where do you live, if I may ask?
I live by the airport,
Yeah.
and there's no Comcast service there. Fairpoint is there, but they have oversold that area by more than 100.
Huh.
So everybody tries to drop on that one junction, and they say they're not allowed to expand by the state regulations. They are saying they are helpless because the state wants them to provide broadband to unreachable places first before expanding these areas.
So you're not unreachable, so now you're unreachable.
I'm reachable.
I mean, in effect, yeah. If this conversation is a little bit cryptic, let me explain. Farhad's PC is called a Chromebook. A Chromebook uses a Google licensing and Google operating system. The key thing is there's nothing on that laptop except web browsers.
Exactly.
There's no desktop to save things to. That sounds kind of goofy, but you can do so much in a web browser now. Email, games, Word documents, all those kind of things. So it's a wonderful tool. A lot of schools use it, including some here in this district. The only downside is you have to be online for it to work, which is why I was picking on them for that. It's also a nice machine. It's an interesting one.
Well, it's
But that-
actually an interesting point, though, even for where Fahad lives, because when the airport upgrades were made, we have some pretty good businesses out there that do specialty work on small aircraft. And, here you are, it's the irony, they're installing the newest mandate of aviation communication, so small airplanes can communicate with each other and communicate with the big ones, but they can't reach a catalog. And so we thought that was going to be a moment where something was going to change because it was a state airport and maybe this would happen, but your point is.
That's, forgive me for saying so, but that's embarrassing. I mean, in 2018, how
Well,
can-
that's exactly right, and we have businesses that could in fact take more customers and employ more people in very good jobs and be pretty low impacting jobs, and yet that's a big restriction to them. It's like, they're trying to access Garmin.
Yes.
It was one of the best
Yes.
in the business at what they
Yes.
do, and they can't, and they're doing it with steam-powered wires.
There's a tin can and a string that they're working
It's
with.
not much different than, it's like opening the window of a plane, yelling down, can you hear me? Yeah, it's, no, but so your points are really well good, and that is actually was identified previously as a major economic development problem. So I appreciate the fact you're doing that, and that's gonna, this conversation has to continue.
I'll tell you what, they started with 3 Mbps at my house.
Down or up?
That was 6 years ago. Before that, I had no.
Those download 3 Mbps?
It was 3 Mbps, then went up to 5, now we have 10 Mbps, but we get about 5 Mbps worth of stuff.
In effect, in practice, yeah, in part because of the demand, yeah, and that's paltry. That's very paltry.
Did you want to say
Please.
something?
I was just going to say that I think that people would certainly say that broadband is important, we need it, you know, we can understand the points you made and others have made about it being an economic driver, but it will come down to what it costs and what people are willing to pay. So in the survey question, that's what's going to, you know, like, and that's where we've been stuck. Like, how do we put an estimate price tag on this so that people can respond to that? Like, are you willing to pay X?
Well, funny you
like
should
that.
mention that, but because Chris and Susan did a lot of work on the survey, including questions exactly about that. So that's the kind of thing that we can really, and we can really ask people in great detail. But again, we also need to know what they're paying now to get a sense of, you know, will $100 a month be good for you? Well, what are you paying now, for example? And we need to get that information. It does come down to cost. That's what, when you said before, the question of expertise, I was going to jump in and say, yeah, but also money.
Well, yeah, well, it will, and it could very conceivably be a phased build-out. I mean,
Sure.
I look at the Exchange Street industrial section and say, okay, that's, I'm screaming for it. You know, I have a home-based engineering business, and it would be nice, and eventually, if it came down my street, I would certainly pay for it, and there's a lot of us who do that. But I think it's also one of those things is once it starts to get established in town, and people see it at their businesses, they want it at home. So
Right.
I could see a logical progression to it.
That's a good phase development. I'll just mention 2 points, and then I'll stop hogging the mic. One really key point is that the technological demands for broadband are only going to increase. I mean, when you mentioned Netflix, we're simply accustomed to that now. It's actually entered the language. But when we look at newer technologies such as virtual reality, they soak up a lot more bandwidth. And so that's not going to go away. That's going to keep growing. So what we have now is not sufficient. It's going to be even less efficient coming down. The other is we're talking about people who have access to it. We're experiencing a digital divide now between basically those with fine digital access and those without. In a culture, in a nation that's as riven and split right now, that divide is simply going to increase. And I don't think we can afford to have it do that politically, morally, or ethically. Are there any other questions, or should I yield the podium back?
Did want to check to see if Chris wanted to add anything.
He was hiding, but did you?
He's good.
I think so. Right?
It does sound like there is, you know, some agreement to maybe take it up at your retreat and go from there. And certainly Brian is a good person to, I would say, take Chris with you too. He takes amazing notes.
He does.
The college was interested, if you go back to them, they were interested in having a select board person on the representative. So just make sure you do that. And so I won't be joining that group coming back. Okay?
Okay.
Ooh, so there you go.
Thank you all.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Brian, for all your work. Thank you, Chris. Brian, I didn't ask you if you wanted to say something. Carpenter, sorry.
No, I'm good.
Okay.
We've been heading this up, and I think that was a great wrap-up. We need to discuss this at our retreat and set a course to try to move something forward.
Okay, thank you. All right, so now we have consider the letter of support for malt grant application to the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation for the trail around Middlebury Trail and signage improvements. Whew, that's a statement.
Malt Executive Director Jamie Montague is asking the board to sign a letter of support as a required element of a grant application she is planning to submit to the Vermont Department of Forest, Parks, and Recreation to seek funding for improved signage at TAM kiosks and improvements to key sections of the trail. She is also requesting the board's approval of a letter required by the grant program that offers MALT formal permission to access portions of the TAM that cross town property in Wright Park to upgrade signage and make trail improvements. And that's the request.
Ta-da. Any questions from the board?
I was gonna move it.
Oh, you go ahead and move it.
All that.
Wow, that's just sad. Is there a second to that sad
I'll
motion?
second.
Any other discussion? It looks like we are first going to sign a select board letter of support for Malt's proposed grant application to fund the signage and trail improvements on the trail around Middlebury. So let's deal with that one first.
Okay.
All in favor, please say aye.
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 Thanks, Ryan. Any opposed? Okay, and I'm sure you meant to say that the second motion would be to sign a select board letter authorizing Malt to access town land in Wright Park as necessary to maintain and upgrade the signage and trail conditions. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you very much. All right, so then we have authorized the application to the state of Vermont for a Vermont Community Development Program. Oh, this is the planning grant for the planning, design, and legal services associated with the construction of community septic in Lindell Mobile Home Park.
Yep, I'm back.
She's back, yay! So you need from us this evening just to adopt the resolution for the grant application authority?
And authorize the matching funds.
Okay. So is there anybody who'd like to,
Do we need two motions?
yes?
Yes,
Do you wanna
okay.
go
No.
for- Oh, you got them already,
I'll
okay.
make a motion to adopt the resolution of the VCDP Grant Application Authority.
It's, thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Second, I'll make a motion to approve the commitment of town matching funds of up to $7,500 to be drawn from the VCDP revolving loan / grant fund.
Second.
Thank you, Victor. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay,
Awesome.
yay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
You can come back when you stay longer?
Right?
It's getting,
Sorry, while we take a minute to do this.
Well, that's going around. Last time I was here was for the North Pleasant Street housing, probably. And we're exploring with Housing Vermont, putting in, free broadband Wi-Fi for the whole development. Internet access was a problem over there with affordability.
Great, thank you so much for doing that. Okay, so next up is finalize the FY19 budget proposal for town meeting. This one's Kathleen's.
yes.
Take it away, Kathleen.
So at your last meeting, we had heard from the library that they have withdrawn their $12,500 request for assistance for the library director. The documents you have in your packet reflect that change. Happy to answer any other questions you have. One item that was added to the packet yesterday was an analysis of the fund balance and what is going to be what I have proposed providing, applying to the budget. So here in your packet, I have it up on the screen. We have, as of June 30th, 2017, we had $544,009 in unrestricted fund balance. We have applied $150,000 of that to the FY18 budget, which is in progress. We have prepaid expenses that were included in that number that will be expensed in this year. And the budget I presented to you included $150,000 for the FY19 budget. leaving you a net unrestricted after allocations and prepaid expenses, $191,550.
Any questions from the board?
So, charging on, it came up at the last meeting. Victoria DeWind brought up the possibility of finding $28,239 so that you could present a level tax rate estimate budget to the voters. One way you could do that is to take additional funds from the fund balance, noting, of course, that once you allocate those funds, they're allocated for that purpose, and your reserve is getting lower.
I think we need to be moving the other direction in the reserve fund myself, but that's me.
Right, I agree, but is there any other place that we can think of or that you would recommend that we could look at for level funding?
I think that was probably the only thing that you had going on. We've done so
much.
many other things. Part of me is okay with having the budget be $28,000 more than last year, but I'm not so set on having it be level funded. I mean, and I personally would probably take even less out of the reserve fund, but I know that that was important to people, so, but that's me. I'm not sure how everybody else feels
So
about it.
one other piece of information, taking a look at what the impact of the about 0.4 cents increase would be on a $250,000 home. I worked that out, and that's $9.25 for the annual impact of the tax increase.
Keep it where it is. I think you've done a great job. You and the staff have done a great job of keeping it where it is. It's a minimal amount, and I agree with Susan. This is here for a reason, and I don't want to run a risk of depleting it too much. So, thank you. I'm happy with where it is.
It's a good point, though, Laura. I think if our goal was to level fund it, then we should pursue that, but I don't think that was ever our overarching goal. So, but I think Victoria had some very good points about what to do next year, certainly with infrastructure and some of the other things. So definitely want to take her up on those for budgeting for next year.
And Victoria did come in to follow up on the equipment fund.
Oh, great.
And ask some follow-up questions and talk about next steps in that regard.
Okay. So anything you wanted to talk about, Brian?
No, I think that it'd be interesting. One of the things I was thinking would be nice as part of my presentation for town meeting is to talk about the last, I think it's 3 years now, the total amount that, I guess just the point that how well Kathleen and the staff have managed the budget, and what are we looking at, $22,000 or something, that additional revenues that we're going to try to gain through taxes this year, which is really minimal on the size budget that we're talking about, especially when you look at the impacts of other statewide budgets.
I think next year is going to be tough, just because I think every little thing that could be scraped has been scraped, and I think we got lucky this year with the insurance. It was about $100,000, so I think the board's going to have its work cut out for it next year of where to save money and how to go forward at the same time.
I agree with you there, and which is why I'm not asking to, because I think we're going to probably we're going to need to pull any additional fund revenues to even sustain the budget at the levels that we're at right now, given what I'm seeing for next year's budget.
Okay.
So I'm looking for a motion to finalize the warning for the Town of Middlebury 2018 Annual Town Meeting.
So move.
Thank you, Nick. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Laura. Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? I don't think so. Whew, you made it through another one, Kathleen.
So far.
All right, so it looks like infrastructure. Looks like Dan's coming in.
No, we have the warning.
Oh, we do?
Do we have to finalize the warning, or is that?
Finalize the warning? Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do something wrong?
No,
Okay,
just
so
11.
I just don't have my other things. Okay, so I was trying to skip the most important part. Okay. Sorry, Kathleen. Got a little excited. Did you want to say anything to us first?
This is the warning that we reviewed last time, no
Yep.
changes. All I did was fill in the dollar amounts from the budget in Article 2 and cleaned up Article 3. I had provided some additional information for the board's information having to do with the cost of each of these pieces of equipment, which wasn't necessary for the warning.
Okay.
And Bunge Putnam reviewed this warning and added the reserve fund language to Article 5, which is the Cross Street Bridge Fund. So he added pursuant to 24 VSA 2804-A.
Okay.
And other than that, all we have going on the Australian ballot is the elected officers.
I've never seen that before. It's kind of exciting and different, so. Any questions for Kathleen? Looks like Laura does.
So the Humane Society request doesn't, where does that go?
Theirs is an increase, isn't it?
Oh, that was just an increase, okay.
Yep.
So that's
Yeah.
that, okay. And in Article 5, do we need the word increased? Can we just delete that? Because really, isn't our point to offset spending for capital improvements?
It was the increase from this year over last year, so it was the difference between last year's spending and this year's spendings. So I see your point, but that, it was specifically to cover, we didn't choose a project, we just chose to cover the difference between the budget from last year to this year.
Okay.
That was where we came up with that dollar figure, was the differences in the capital improvements portion of the budget, Laura.
Okay.
And we could say to offset spending, but then it would just be sort of generally thrown at it, and the amount was specific for that difference.
Yeah, I'm just thinking about how it lands for us, because really what we're trying to set as a precedent is using some of our local option tax money for capital improvement projects, not necessarily increases, they might be, but,
Right.
and that's how we came up with this one, but really, it's really to offset capital improvement projects. So I really wondered about whether we needed that word.
Mhm.
I know if the question came to us, we could say that's what it was, but,
Right. I don't know. I'm not sure.
okay.
No, let's find out. Does anybody have any suggestions?
Fine with it the way it is.
Okay.
I don't, I'd be okay either way, but at this point, it's all been sort of looked at and vetted, so I kind of, it's a good point. Just thinking.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Okay, so I'm finished with that one,
You
with
good?
Article 5.
Okay.
I'm good with Article 5. And so the Turning Point Center, I know they weren't here, and I don't know if this is this our only chance to put in an article for them if they were looking for an ask?
This would be the moment, yes. Yep.
Okay.
Did you
I
want?
do have some pause, I'm not saying we should do it, I do feel bad, that they didn't get it together,
Yeah.
to make their request. At the same time, I'm struggling too with our Health and Human Services contributions and our philosophy in general. And I know that we have a practice for asking 3 to come before us, but I think that we need to study again, like how we allocate funds for them.
Mhm.
And just, do we have a grand total that we say we're gonna manage to and
Yeah.
do it that way, or what? So I'm still struggling with it, and I I feel bad for them because they are in need of the funds. They're providing an important service. We just had a death, related to alcohol, and they are a recovery center, and they're just not, they're new at fundraising. So they could use our help, and so I'm just thinking about it. And I'm gonna let it pass this time, but with regret.
I think it's nice. I think we have done that in the past. Who was it? It was a Restorative Justice missed it previously, and then they came back and had all their numbers and all their information, and they were ready the next time. So I think we could probably help them with that, at least encourage them to do it this year in time. They didn't provide any of the other numbers, so it makes it really hard to,
I know.
you can't quantify their need at all. So they might be in need, but we can't quantify it. I was on the committee that put together the policy, and one of the suggestions at the time that the subcommittee did not take up was other towns who had a cap. And then they said there's $250,000 that can go to Health and Human Services, and it'll have to be divided up among them. That is one way to approach the situation, and the board may want to consider that in the future. It certainly works well for other towns, but it creates other issues on the backside of how you're going to allocate and things like that. But it was definitely a popular way for some of the other towns to manage that those line items in their budget.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to have the discussion.
Yeah, no, it's a great point. Anything else? Okay, so I think we're still looking for, I'm looking for a motion to finalize the warning for Town of Middlebury 2018 Annual Town Meeting. Thank you, Nick.
I'll second.
Thank you, Farhad. Any other comments? Okay, all in favor, please say aye.
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 Thank you. Any opposed? All right, it's done. Now it's Dan. Welcome, Dan. So I saw in here.
You're a little early, just.
I was going to say a few words while you get set up.
Sure, go ahead.
That we had talked about in infrastructure, just to follow up for the board. There's the conveyance of property for the Bank of Middlebury, and the committee took that on, and there was a lot of lively discussion about it. There was a recommendation from the Public Works staff that the property be town-owned, but maintained by Marble Works. What the committee decided is that it's a very strategic piece of land for the town, the bank, and for Marble Works, and that there was probably going to be some protocol of potentially involving a third entity into these discussions of the conveyance. So they were going to investigate that and get back to the committee later. So still working on it is what the update is. Other than that, the water planning loan for Exchange Street, Dan has been working with the engineers and will be putting together a schedule for getting us to the November 18 date that everyone can follow. I think that he's heard from Ashley Lucht that is a tight date, but he seems very gung-ho that we can do it. So it's putting together a schedule that not only the infrastructure committee and staff, but the select board and the businesses on Exchange Street can follow as well. So something that everyone can see if we're hitting the marks along the way. Does that pretty much cover those two?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's fine.
All right, so we have a lot of things. Do you want to talk about the engineering agreement for Charles Avenue?
Sure, we'll start off with that one. First one is Charles Avenue engineering agreement, Green Mountain Engineering. Quick recap, this project starts at the high school, south end of Charles Avenue at the stop sign there, and goes north up the hill and down around the curve towards the Universalist Society's building, where we left off a project a few years ago. So this includes complete sidewalk, curbing, road recycling, a small section of sanitary sewer, and water main. And so the engineering request tonight is for approved engineering for Green Mountain Engineering, Inc. Their fee for the project is $69,950. Again, was reviewed with the Infrastructure Committee. Just an item of note, item 8 on their proposal is for construction review services, and that's estimated at $54,700, which is the time it takes for an engineer to be on site for inspection of the project. So I'm requesting the committee to recommend that agreement, or the board to recommend, requesting the board approve that agreement from the Infrastructure Committee.
I'll make a motion to approve the Infrastructure Committee's recommendation to award an engineering services contract to Green Mountain Engineering for planned improvements to water, sewer, sidewalk infrastructure on Charles Avenue at a total cost of $69,950.
Second.
Thank you, Victor.
Can I also add that that also included lighting?
Oh, good. I was going to ask.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
And that does include it even though it's not specified.
Yep.
I made sure of that.
All right, any questions? Any discussion? Okay. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, thank you.
Next one is the negotiation of agreement for wastewater treatment plant evaluation. There is a subcommittee of 4 that reviewed the proposals from several engineering firms. We had 3 that submitted. At the end of that interview process, the subcommittee was most comfortable with Tata and Howard's submittal. Bob Wells checked references, and they were mostly in a positive direction. So we reviewed this with the Infrastructure Committee, and the committee is recommending to the Select Board to have Kathleen negotiate a contract with Tata and Howard for the evaluation of the wastewater plant. So there's no fee yet identified. Scope has to be ironed out in concrete, and then they'll come up with a cost proposal to do that. Bob Wells and I are tentatively have a schedule with him on Friday to meet with them at the wastewater plant and start the process. So pending your approval, that's the date.
I was going to say. Do you want to go for it again?
Sure. Excuse me. I'd like to make a motion to support the Infrastructure Committee's recommendation to authorize Town Manager Kathleen Ramsey to negotiate a contract with Tata Howard for the wastewater treatment plant evaluation project.
I'll second.
Thank you, Farhad. Any discussion?
Let's go.
All right. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. So, Shard Villa Bank stabilization?
Correct. The next is an award for engineering contract for the Shard Villa Bank stabilization, Shard Villa Road Bank stabilization, and the road improvement project. This is located just as you head south on Shard Villa. You come off of the 3 Mile Bridge Road area, you take the curve, cross the Middlebury River, starts right there and goes south about 2,700 feet. There's about 210 feet of the riverbank which is being eroded by the river, and it's approaching the shoulder of the road. And we've had some little sinkholes and potholes on the edge of the shoulder. So this project is to stabilize that 200-foot section of the bank, and then once that's done, the road will be ground up, recycled, and repaved, and so on and so forth. So we sent out requests for proposals for engineering firms. We got 3 back. Du Bois and King was one, Green Mountain Engineering another, and Pathways Consulting was the third. We reviewed these at the Infrastructure Committee, and One that we proposed to the board is from Du Bois and King for $45,169. We felt they most accurately and economically submitted the best proposal. Their proposal contained numerous examples of bank stabilization, and which most of us felt comfortable with. At least they've had adequate experience to take a look at this one and hopefully do it the best way. So, infrastructure recommended Du Bois and King for $45,169. So requesting the board to approve that.
I'll make a motion to approve the Infrastructure Committee's recommendation to award an engineering services contract to Du Bois and King for the Shardvilla Road Improvements Project for a total cost of $45,169.
Second.
Thank you, Victor. All right, any discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, thank you. Building and Storage Planning Project.
Right. So in your notes, there's a reference to the December 15th Infrastructure Committee meeting. This was discussed at that time. Judy Harris of Harris & Harris, who has done some other consulting work for the town on various projects, fire station, this building, so on and so forth, submitted a pathway, I guess, for us to proceed with storage at the old wastewater treatment plant for a variety of needs, and along with looking at the needs of the Public Works Department's site. And so her recommendation was that we double track this and try to take a look at both of these projects at the same time, because the needs of the storage at the wastewater plant may change based on what we get through down the road with the Public Works site. So she thought that it would be best if we could allow for $5,000 for each project, for a total of around $10,000 to take a look at that project. There's money set aside in capital planning for building facilities to do this. So requesting the board to proceed with Harris & Harris to look at the storage and the Public Works building site.
Want me to go?
Go for it.
Okay. I'd like to make a motion to approve the Infrastructure Committee's recommendation to proceed with planning projects for, 1, a new police department storage facility and decommissioning the control building at the old wastewater treatment plant, and 2, a new storage facility at Department of Public Works at an estimated cost of $5,000 per project.
Second.
Thank you. Any other discussion?
Well, I just want to be clear, so we're not talking about the offices, we're talking about just storage at Public Works?
Yes.
Well, it's storage
the-
at the police department site. I'm sorry, at the old wastewater plant policeman.
No,
department
I
site.
understood that.
That's that
but-
one.
But then the second part that she would be looking at is just related to storage at the existing Public Works site, or the whole campus?
It's the whole campus.
That's what I wanted to clarify.
Yeah,
Okay.
yes. We've looked at the square footage needs of inside and outside.
Right.
And we're trying to find a location that works better for us.
So it's possible that after the review, that she may recommend a new site, right?
Yes.
Okay, and we're abandoning the forest property
Yes.
across the street for all the reasons expressed by Bill,
Yes.
even
'Cause-
though it had the convenience of being next to the salt shed. And at one point, you thought it had some advantage
Some.
together
Some.
over there, but not, okay.
Few.
So we wouldn't be moving the salt shed?
No.
It would remain there, right?
Right.
Okay,
Right.
and looking at
That's what it
sites
says.
going
I know,
forward.
I can't remember from what we talked about in December.
It'll be interesting to see, like, whether she comes, are we looking at the police department as potential for everything? Integrating everything?
Possibly some land behind the salt building site.
Oh, land behind that, oh, yeah, I remember that, okay. So, okay,
I just want to make sure that what the committee suggested matches up with what we're saying. Is it a miss thing here, or was it just trying to make sure what we came up with. Is it just the storage, or is it the whole building? Because this says new storage structure at Public Works several times, so I just want to make sure what the committee voted on matches up with what we're suggesting.
From December
Right.
15, in 2 seconds, I have that in front of me here. Where'd it go? Okay. This is from the 12-15 meeting. Baker moved to proceed with Harris and Harris's recommendation to double-track 2 projects, the storage building site at the old wastewater treatment plant and a future public works site.
Okay.
Yeah, the number 2 on this is not quite.
Doesn't match up.
It's kind of contradictory.
And it's a great
So-
question.
So should I amend the motion?
I just want to make sure because what you did was off of the sheets, so I think we do need a friendly amendment.
Okay.
Okay.
I'll amend the motion to state that it's an evaluation of a potential new public works site. Is that correct from what you just read?
Yeah, and 2, site plan development for a new
And site
public
plan
works site.
development for a new public works.
Yeah.
And
Okay.
it was you, Victor, who
Yeah, it's fine.
So, okay. Okay. Just getting all the technicals. Any other discussion? Thank you for that question. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. So this is where we were going to do the inline flow meters. If you've got that information too. I've got some,
So you've got the memo from Kathleen?
I
and from
did.
Bob?
I'm not sure if the rest of the board did. There was a memo that came in today. Do you want to just give a quick?
Sure. These flow meters are used they stick inside the sewer main pipes, sewer mains, at various places where we think we might have infiltration. And then they're matched with the rain gauge at the wastewater plant, and I think Bob has another one in town. They're used to determine how much infiltration is going into these sanitary sewer lines. And so that information is used to determine, where the infiltration is, what are we going to fix? So part of the CSO work is to identify those areas so we can eliminate the overflows at some of the pump stations. So our previous meters one was purchased in '02 and the other one in '07. And they're in a pretty rough environment, and so they no longer work. Bob looked at a cost to rent them, and we thought about, once we found that out, I said, holy cow, that's like $5,100, and it might be better to pursue purchase, because we're going to be using these for quite a while, not just for this season. So we felt it would be worthwhile to go ahead with purchase. So the reason the request comes tonight is because we want to get these in town and get them calibrated and programmed through the engineers. The engineers are the one who mostly work with these, so we can get this, if there's a spring thaw, spring rain, we get them in so we're ready for the spring flush.
Already missed a couple.
Huh?
Already missed a couple.
I did? Yeah. So we actually got an extension from US EPA because last year was dry, and there wasn't much chance for infiltration. So this is our window to get it. So we're requesting the board to approve 2 ISCO, is the brand, 2 ISCO meters for a total cost of $10,463.
So the memo says approximately. Do we need to set an amount not to exceed, or are we comfortable that this is what the cost would be?
I'm not sure why Bob has an approximate. It sounds like it's a hard price, but I think it's,
How about
you can say a not to exceed 11 if you'd like, but
How about or I was gonna say like 10.5.
Yeah,
Does that work?
I would hope.
Is that okay? So I'll make a motion that we purchase 2 new ISCO meters for a not-to-exceed price of $10,500 based on Bob Wells, wastewater superintendent's recommendation.
Thank you. Do we need a destination for that purchase, or is it okay to leave that open-ended?
Where's
There's
it?
no vendor.
There's no vendor?
Does it come from Aldrich Lodge?
It's ISCO. I think it's directly from
Oh,
them.
directly
To-
from ISCO?
To ISCO, okay.
It's-
All right.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay.
Do we know what the time frame is in getting those in and getting them in
I
place?
think it's just a few weeks to get them here, yeah.
Good.
That's coming out of the wastewater fund?
Yes, there's two line items. One is we had a flow meter replacement left over from a few years ago, which is exactly this category, and the other will come out of sewer line improvements, the rest of the balance.
Okay, so I think that's it.
Okay,
Thank you, Dan.
thank you.
All right, so we need to set the date for the annual Select Board Strategic Planning Retreat. Apparently, the March 20th was not available.
Yes, we're having a flashback to last year.
Yeah.
When we had great difficulty scheduling the strategic planning retreat. So, and what we did, given our difficulty, is we broke it into 2 evenings. We broke it into an orientation retreat where the board discussed its subcommittees and the appointments to that early in the year. So I'm proposing to do that on March 27th, which is before your regularly scheduled meeting, hoping that you could come in a little bit early that evening and we could take care of that business. It's a Tuesday. So that would be March 27th for the orientation retreat. And then consultant Paula Cope is available on April 26th, also a Thursday evening, for the strategic planning retreat. 26th.
So March 27th before this regular Select Board
Mhm.
meeting, and then April 26th for the in-depth.
So once a Tuesday, once a Thursday.
Mhm.
Say the 27th is fine, the 26th is a no-go for me. I know that's definitely an out.
Looks like Victor was nodding his head. How about you, Brian? Do those dates work for you?
They appear to. I couldn't quite hear you, Kathleen. The 27th, is that basically an organizational meeting?
Correct.
Okay. So we need both of them.
Yes, please.
Okay.
So I guess we're looking at, which one, neither of them works?
Oh, no, the first one works, the 26th definitely does not work. I've already got a
Okay.
commitment in there.
So perhaps there will be some, part of the issue is that Paula Cope is teaching a class on the earlier nights of the week. And so we're looking for Thursdays.
A Thursday could work, so, for example, the 19th would work. But because the 20th is when I depart, but the 26th is a problematic week.
So April 19th, does
I'll
that work
pass
for
that.
everybody?
I'll pass that by.
That doesn't work for me. I'm away that week.
Is that school vacation week? Not that it matters, but
I can find out for you.
How about the previous week, April 12th? April 12th?
Give that a shot.
Yeah, that's okay. Brian, is April 12th okay?
Yes.
April
School
12th
vacation.
works for me.
is, oh, it's the last. Yeah, okay, that's fine.
So April 12th?
We're talking 5:30?
Yes.
Okay.
But there's also an advantage to having them fairly close together. You know, it's, they're related enough.
Well, we did want to get our retreat done earlier in the cycle this coming year.
Would you like 2 dates to run by Paula, or is the one okay? Because we have April 12th seems to be okay. Did you want a second date just in case? for
Sure.
the-
Why don't we take one, just in case?
I was going to say, while we're all here. So it would be, would you want to go the earlier April? I don't know if we can.
That's what you originally also proposed, but, right? April 5th.
Oh, the 5th, okay.
April 5th.
She said
So-
no to that one?
Who said no?
I don't know, because that was what was in the packet.
I said no to that.
You said no to that one.
I had planned to go to a training seminar that night, but I could cancel that.
No,
No.
that's my birthday.
No.
So
Okay.
you have to have cake if we meet that night.
So,
Where's my cake from last week?
Was your birthday last week?
if we have cake, will you come?
Well, Kathleen can't do it that night.
Right, so what about, you'd have to push it back to May 3rd at that point, right?
So what about March?
March 29th.
March 29th?
She was not available, I thought.
Somebody's not available on the 20th.
Okay. I'll run March 29th by her again, and
Wasn't that in the
Yeah,
packet?
that's in the packet,
Yeah, March 29th.
March 29th. So what about Thursday, May 3rd? Just in case.
That just keeps drawing it further out.
What's wrong with March 29th?
It was originally a date in the packet, so we're assuming she's not available.
She's not available.
No, I would rather personally opt for even getting into the 15th of March, if we, in the 22nd, have them relatively close in, because again, pushing it further out into May, Brian's point is valid, that we want to get this relatively soon.
So my only concern is staff time. I mean, that's the Thursday after town meeting, so is that,
so you're proposing March 15th?
15.
Do you want to do that before your organizational meeting? But it's not.
Well, if it's that early, perhaps we could do both
Yeah,
at the same.
that's true. Okay.
Exactly right.
Okay, so we'll try for March 15th and April 12th.
Sounds good. Does that work for you, Brian?
I haven't checked this other one. March 15th is where we're coming down?
So looking at April 12th and March 15th. It would be one or the other.
So April 12th definitely works. March 15th, I could make it. I just have to have an assistant coach do the spring parent athlete meeting, 'cause that's that same night. But this is, if that's the date, that's important. And I've got plenty of capable assistant coaches.
Okay.
I agree with Nick that the sooner in the year we could do it is better.
The earlier the better.
Yeah, it is best. Okay.
So 2 meetings for you that week.
I know.
2 meetings for the board that week.
That's fine. It's fine.
Okay.
it's not ideal, but if that's what we need to do to get it done, then.
Okay. All right, approval of the check warrants? You're up.
I did the check review, everything seems to be in order. So I would like to move to approve the total expenditures in amount of $544,093.63, out of which $437,205.76 goes for the accounts payable, and $106,887.87 goes to the payroll.
All right.
Second?
Thank you. All in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay. Thank you very much. Town managers report.
Just a couple of things. First, the Addison County Regional Planning Commission is holding a hearing on its proposed regional plan on Wednesday, February 14th at 7 p.m. at the Addison County Regional Planning Commission offices. The proposed plan is available online on their website. You asked for an update on the proposed rail platform, the siting of the proposed rail platform. And in response to the inquiry, Planning and Zoning Director Jennifer Murray reported that we are using a Transportation Advisory Committee grant from the Addison County Regional Planning Commission to perform an alternatives analysis the Addison County Regional Planning Commission is heading up procurement and project administration, disbursements, contracts, et cetera. And Jennifer will be the project lead, and the Planning Commission will be the steering committee. Anticipated schedule January through March procurement. She's working with Josh Donabedian of the Regional Planning Commission on that. And March through June, public and input, analysis, report, and selection of final location.
Okay. Any questions?
Well, is that going to be okay timeline-wise? I thought, was there any reason we had to have it by the end of March?
The Agency of Transportation, Dan Dillabrer, Chief of the Rail Division, asked for it by March. I have reached out to him and let him know this proposed amendment of it.
So it doesn't jeopardize us in any way?
We'll find out, I guess, if he doesn't approve.
So they need this so they can go into project design, and they're hoping to do that this year. It'll push that back a couple of months, but they have 2 years for project design and permitting before construction in 2020.
Okay. All right. Board member concerns? Nick?
Couple things. First of all, I had the opportunity to attend with Jim Gish and Brian and Kathleen the meeting of the House and Senate Transportation Subcommittees discussion last week on our bridge project. I want to say that both Brian and Jim did an outstanding job presenting the town's issue. I think it was well heard and I believe well understood by the legislators on the criticality and the importance of the project. So it was very well done, and a lot of credit to both of them for an outstanding job. It's important work. Second of all, as Mr. Mooney mentioned about the ladder truck, well, it's arrived. It's been there, I guess, a couple of weeks, and I actually had the opportunity to get introduced to it by Chiefs Shaw and Selleck, and I can say, I think with a great degree of confidence, that the fire department did an outstanding job making sure that the taxpayers are getting good value for money. I think it's a vehicle that's going to last a long time. It always amazes me what they cost, but that's the way they are. And my hopes now is that it serves our town well and keeps our firefighters safe as they do their job, keeping us safe. So good job, guys, and be well with it.
Nice.
Can we organize a meet and greet for the select board in the new ladder truck?
Maybe a drive-by?
It's pretty cool.
Yeah.
Take us around town.
Can I sit in it?
That's a great idea. Victor?
I would just like to commend and thank our legislators for the support of the railroad project.
Yep, I think that's great.
I'm good.
You're
I'm
good?
I'm good.
Okay. I'm going to go to Brian.
The only one thing, if Kathleen, are you going to be at the ACRPC annual review of the transportation plan?
I could be, yes.
Well, maybe somebody else will. I was trying to figure out, maybe you already know, is the roundabout at the end of Exchange Street still number one on the priorities request list for our region, or where does it fall?
I think that review is coming up, and I will attend and report back.
Okay. Anything else?
And then,
go ahead.
And then the other thing is just I'm working on a editorial that I'd like to put in ask Addie Indy to publish, just to talk about kind of where we are on the bridge and clear up some issues. I think there's some misunderstandings, and I just think it's time that we put something out there, and I'll make sure everybody gets a chance to see it before we publish it.
Okay. Thank you. Farhad?
Yes, I just want to express my sadness to that gentleman who died in the park. My heart goes out to him, my thoughts and prayers. I found out later on that he was from Bosnia and he lived alone for a long time. And he was a nice guy, I know him.
I'm sorry. Okay.
Yeah, so at our last Public Health and Safety Committee meeting, we covered many things and that came up. So we're definitely alert and paying attention to it. I know we had a comment early this evening about, being on the lookout in our community in lots of ways, and we do try, to do that. There was a lot going on that weekend, including messy weather. And so this is also a reminder that the winter parking ban applies to our municipal lots as well as our streets. Sometimes that's not always clear to people because they see the language highway and they think only streets, but actually the state statute for highway also applies to municipal lots, which includes the lot behind the Ilsley Library. So I just wanted to say that for anyone who's watching tonight so that they're clear about that in the event that we have more weather conditions and need to clear those lots, because we don't want to block in vehicles or damage vehicles, and we want to make sure that there's egress through those lots. So that was one thing, and I had been working on a town meeting poll, and it's in your packet for a first draft. I'm not attached to doing this, but I see it as an opportunity, as before, to allow people to express comments and sign up for the town email list, and for us to ask a question or two if we want. So there's some discussion about that, and you could be thinking about that. We still have some time to look at that and see where we go with that. So just make sure you take a look at that. And then finally, John Snyder White, who was in the audience tonight, was recognized recently in the Addison Independent for a distinction of being trained as a realtor who knows how to analyze green building and efficiency. So I recommended that maybe the Energy Committee reach out to him. I was glad to see him tonight. So maybe he's exploring, I hope, as others are, I hope, like interest in our boards, commissions, task forces, committees. And if you go to the Town of Middlebury website under meetings and minutes, you can scroll down and you can see the menu of different options that you could consider. So we have vacancy on Parks and Rec right now, again, and we're always looking for volunteers on our other committees. They rotate, so be thinking about that. We need a new Green Up Day coordinator. So those are opportunities for people to consider, and I hope you will.
Thank you. It's a good reminder, Laura. Oh gosh, now I've forgotten what I was going to ask. The town meeting. Usually sometime in February, Kathleen lets us know what the plan is and if we have, as board members, some sort of role in town meeting or not. So I'm hoping, do you know which meeting you're going to give us the whole rundown, Kathleen?
Usually do that the second meeting.
Okay, great. Just sort of curious, sometimes people want to know. That sounds great. I know in the past year, maybe it's been 2 years, that the presentations have been handled not by all the board members. And I really appreciate that, and I think the audience and other participants appreciate it as well, so.
I'm definitely thinking of that again this year, a nice, concise, efficient, coherent presentation.
Great, yay. All right, thank you very much. I'm looking for, we don't have an executive session, and so I'm looking for a motion to adjourn. Thank you, Farhad. Is there a second? Second. Thank you. And all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Good night, Joe.
Thanks,
night, Brian.
Brian.
Good night, Brian.